Hello and welcome back to another video. This is the second part of a series of videos where I'm going to try and get foreigners and new riders in Singapore acquainted with the common questions that just don't appear on Google when you are trying to find out how to navigate the bureaucracy and red tape of riding a motorcycle in Singapore. As usual, the questions come from a viewer from Canada that is intending to move to Singapore and getting a motorcycle license here. So let's get on with the first question. Is the process of renewing the COE straightforward? I've been on the One Motoring website and it seems straightforward, but just want to check with you. I hope the renewal process can be done yourself and you don't need a dealer to get the renewal for you. Now, the process is actually really pretty straightforward as much as we don't have a lot of information on our site. But once you actually go to the One Motoring website and log in to your own account with your SingPass, you should have a SingPass in general by now. Usually, even if you're a foreigner, they try to push it to you because it coordinates all your governmental related documents and e-services. So when you arrive, I'm pretty sure an immigration officer or somebody related to your stay here in Singapore would have talked you through it. And if you go to the One Motoring website and log in with your SingPass, there should be a section that says that lets you know that says to renew your COE. If you don't see it in general once you log into the One Motoring website, it's now very, very modern. There's a dashboard with a date that says when your COE is ending, and there will always be reminders for you to do so with a link within the website that brings you to the relevant forms and procedure pages when the time comes. So you generally only need to have your SingPass ready, ensure that your insurance already covers your bike and has not lapsed, and preferably you have renewed it for at least the next 6 months. That means if your bike is already with you, hopefully your insurance still covers 6 months after when the COE ends, and then you can get your COE renewed, but it's not absolutely necessary. And then the last one, of course, is that your yearly motorcycle inspection is done at the certified inspection center and is passed within the last 6 months. So that one is absolutely necessary. Then all you need to do is just apply to renew your COE on the One Motoring site and follow their instructions, and then you can pay by credit card or by nets on the website. Then the price is the prevailing rate of the bidding process. So you would be paying the same price as what people that are paying for new bikes would be paying. So if that month the bidding price for COE is 7,000, for example, even though your bike was from 2011 and it's just expired and you're trying to renew it, you are paying the exact same price as what everybody else buying a new 2021 bike would be paying. The next question is, I have read that when you move to Singapore, you can drive with your foreign license initially and need to convert to a Singaporean license within 3 months. If this is true, can I ride a motorcycle with a foreign license for that time frame too? Secondly, can I purchase a motorcycle if I don't have a Singaporean motorcycle license yet, but have my Canadian license? Here's the thing, with an international driving permit and your original license, you can ride a motorcycle in Singapore for up to 12 months from the time you arrive. But you can't buy a motorcycle, you can only rent one. The thing is, the purchase of motorcycles is tied very closely with your residential status in Singapore. So you can't buy one, but you can rent one. Motorcycles that are rented out in Singapore, the motorcycles owned by these rental companies are a specific breed. They have a COE applied to them, but they have something called a trade insurance applied to the vehicle. So in general, in Singapore, when we are talking about the insurance for cars, when you buy insurance for a car, anybody can drive it. Okay, the insurance is applied to the car. But in Singapore, motorcycle insurance is not only tied to the vehicle, the motorcycle that you are insuring, but to the rider as well. So when you buy a motorcycle in Singapore, you can't let somebody else ride it, and you can't buy insurance for a motorcycle in general because of your residential status. That means because of your licensing status, that means you need a Singaporean driving license to be able to insure the motorcycle on your end. But because rental motorcycles, they have a trade insurance applied to their vehicles, their vehicles can be ridden by anyone with a relevant international driving permit and a foreign driving license or a Singapore driving license without it being registered to the rider itself. However, of course, once you move to Singapore and take up permanent residency with a relevant work permit, if I'm not wrong, you must convert your license to a Singaporean license within the first 3 months of your change in residential status before you're allowed to continue riding the bikes. This 12-month period only applies to people on tourist visas or dependent passes with no actual employment residential status in Singapore. Next question is, can you renew the COE an unlimited amount of times? What I'm getting at is, if I continue to pay the COE for a motorcycle, can I continue riding it forever, or is there some regulation that limits how long a motorcycle can be ridden on the road? Well, as long as you keep maintaining the 10-year COE cycles and renewing that specific 10-year COE certificate, you can do so for an unlimited number of times till hell freezes over and the sun goes out, and it's still possible as long as you keep that thing up. Next question. Is vehicle insurance mandatory to ride your bike on the road? I believe it is. If it's mandatory, can you just get basic third-party insurance, or do you have to get comprehensive vehicle insurance that covers any danger or loss to your motorcycle? This is answered on some of my previous questions. Yes, it is mandatory to have insurance on the bike at all times, so long as you own it and you have not put it on layup. Layup is what we call long-term storage, where they also pause this countdown timer on your COE. You have to go through a very strict process on clearing it up with the Land Transport Authority of Singapore to lay up your bike. But in general, as long as your bike is in use in Singapore, you have to get, at bare minimum, third-party insurance. There are 3 kinds of insurance levels in Singapore: third-party, then we have comprehensive, and the last one is third-party fire and theft. Now, comprehensive is optional, just like third-party fire and theft, and generally is used for motorcycles that are expensive or rare collectors' vehicles. So if I'm not even sure if there's a Polesmart SS in Singapore, but for example, if you have something like that, a Ducati Polesmart in Singapore, you would want to have comprehensive insurance, because it is almost impossible to find parts, and even if you do manage to find parts for such a motorcycle, it is very expensive to do so and repair them. So in general, if you have an expensive motorcycle, you will go for comprehensive. Comprehensive also generally applies to people that own supercars, hypercars, Lamborghinis and so on. But in general, the second option is most popular amongst dedicated riders who have slightly valuable bikes but not insanely valuable. So something like mine, it's not particularly expensive, it's not particularly valuable, but it's not exactly cheap either. And since I am a dedicated rider who wants to always keep my motorcycle safe, I will go for that. That's third party fire and theft. So those people that are in this kind of category, and also if you are someone that occasionally rides to Malaysia or Thailand, third party fire and theft would do you so well to have, and it's only a nominal increase over third party, because theft is such a huge problem amongst motorcycles in Singapore, in certain parts of the country, despite what people think about safety in Singapore in general. But in the western portions and the northern portions of Singapore, motorcycle thefts are pretty common, more common than you would think for the level of safety that we offer in our country. And it's even more so in Malaysia and Thailand if you ride to these countries. Of course, in general, in the past, thefts of motorcycles are committed by mostly organized Malaysian gangs and hijackers, and they sometimes have Singaporean collaborators on our side to facilitate the movement of bikes to be chopped up and then distributed across Malaysia. But it has kind of stopped and lowered down quite a fair bit in recent years as Malaysia has started getting a bit more wealthier, and Malaysians themselves are getting wealthier enough to afford their own motorcycles instead of stealing them from Singaporeans. I mean, at least the nice ones. So now a lot of these gangs and hijackers have turned their focus on stealing from other Malaysians and other Thais themselves. So a lot of the thefts have dropped in Singapore because the risk reward here in our country is doesn't pay off as well as just stealing from a Malaysian himself. So there you have it. If you are able to afford TPFT or comprehensive, do so. Third party is generally reserved for when you have absolutely no means to do so except the bare minimum, and usually it's held by people that ride $1,000, $2,000 underbones that have absolutely no value, and generally nobody tries to steal them, and you're just using it for work and have absolutely no interest in riding beyond that. The last question for today's video is importing your bike. I'm wondering whether it is worth bringing your bike with you to Singapore. I came across this blog. This blog is from a person from the UK that came to Singapore around 2007 with his own bike, which lays down the cost involved, and it seems you might save money by importing your bike into Singapore rather than getting one locally. Then again, the post is quite old, again 2007, and not sure if it still holds true. I know the customs value depends on the OMV. The OMV is the open market value of your motorcycle. I'll explain that later. So it's kind of unclear to me whether it is worth doing so. Now, I read the blog and the processes are still valid, except that most of the procedures, they can now be done digitally on a One Motoring website most of the time, except some things that require the presence of you and your bike, which is testing at a certified test center in Singapore to make sure it conforms to our emissions and safety regulations. But otherwise, most of the paperwork can be done electronically over One Motoring and email correspondence. The costs, however, are no longer valid. The thing is, a few years ago, something happened with the additional registration fee in Singapore called the ARF. The ARF was a straight line tax before it became a progressive tax on open market value of the bike. The open market value of a motorcycle is basically the cost of the bike from the manufacturer, including the shipping and handling costs to bring that motorcycle into Singapore as freight. So shipping costs, dock handling fees, etc., etc. That makes the open market value of the motorcycle. The ARF used to be a flat 15% of the OMV of your motorcycle. Now it is a 15% on the first 5,000 Singaporean dollars worth of OMV on the motorcycle being brought in, then 50% on the next 5,000 Singaporean dollars, and then 100% on anything above $10,000. So before that, if you were to, let's say, bring in a motorcycle and the price of the bike itself from manufacturer, the shipping fee, dock handling fees, let's say they all amounted to $15,000 to be brought to our shores, it would be a flat 15%, and the tax on that would be $2,250 tacked on top of the 15,000. Now you have 15% on the first 5,000, blah blah blah, and the ARF would, for the same motorcycle value, would be $8,250 on top of the $15,000 that cost you to buy and bring the bike in. And this applies to both locally bought and used machines imported from overseas. And so, as you can see, while it's definitely still cheaper because your bike would have depreciated by now, so the actual OMV itself would have been lower. But when you take the ARF into account, okay, what is the percentage difference between these two numbers anymore? Before that, you could make a huge argument for that, because ARF made a very small portion, generally a pretty small portion of the price of a bike. Now it makes such a huge portion, and it's a fixed number to the point where, I mean, you could just throw in maybe 1,000 or 2,000 more and get a totally new bike, and it's so much more worth it with less headaches to go through, having to bring the bike in, work with the shipping company, get the bike tested for safety and emissions, and then have it registered, and still pay almost a small discount over what you would get on a new bike. So unless you are bringing in a priceless artifact like the aforementioned Paul Smarts, or even one of those original 70s GSX-R 750s, for example, where they are very, very valuable collector's bikes, there is absolutely no point in bringing your used bike in from overseas. So if you are someone that's planning to return to wherever you came from, it is probably a better idea to just leave the bike that you currently own, if you really love it that much, with family in your country, or friends in your country. Or if that's not feasible, probably better to just sell the bike and come here and buy a new one. So I hope you found all this information useful to you as a foreign rider planning to come to Singapore eventually to start your life here. I will see you next time. On the next video, I have a few more questions from my viewer here, and I would be very keen to share them with you. Talk to you later. Bye bye.